If you just bought your first sewing pattern and aren't sure where to start, or you don't know what the heck to do with it, this video is for you. Welcome to episode 3 of my Learn to Sew series, and this one is all about how to read and use sewing patterns. This video might be a little bit long because there's a lot to cover, so if there are certain parts you want to skip over, I put timestamps in the description so you can just skip to the part that you want to know about. But I'm going to cover paper versus PDF or digital patterns and where to buy them, how to choose your size and how to figure out how much fabric you need to buy, how to assemble your PDF patterns at home and what all those files that you got in your zip file are, sewing symbols and what they mean, how to adjust your pattern to your size, and just some general tips and tricks when cutting out your pattern. But before we dive into it, what is a sewing pattern? A sewing pattern is basically a blueprint for how to make a garment. It's going to have the pattern pieces that you'll need to cut out, along with instructions on how to assemble the pieces into a garment. I'm a firm believer that you should start by sewing patterns before exploring the world of self-drafting, as I think it's so important to learn what pattern pieces generally look like and construction techniques. Not everything is as intuitive as it might seem in sewing, and learning a solid foundation through sewing patterns is 100% what I would recommend to beginners. Okay, we're going to start with pattern types. There are two main types of patterns: paper patterns like this, which come in tissue form, and PDF patterns, which you can buy online. Paper patterns like this would be your big 5 patterns, so Simplicity, McCall's, Butterick, New Look. I can't remember all of them right now, but you will find these at fabric stores like Joann, or if you're in Canada, you can find these at Fabricland as well. And for these patterns, the pattern pieces are printed on big sheets of tissue paper and they're ready to use right out of the packet. This is really convenient as opposed to PDF patterns, which you have to tile together, but they can be quite a bit more expensive. Well, these types of patterns usually retail for around $20 Canadian, I find, but I do know that they go on sale for like $2 at Joann's quite frequently. So if you're in the States, they are a bit cheaper. A lot of indie companies also make paper patterns, and I have one here by Hand London. This is the Charlotte skirt, and these ones usually retail for a bit more than the big 5 patterns. I'd say they're usually between $20 to $35. They're a little bit pricier, but they come in really nice packaging usually, and the tissue is really nice quality. The instruction booklets are really comprehensive and are printed on really beautiful paper as well. So you're paying a bit more, but you're also getting a really nice product. PDF patterns, on the other hand, are digital patterns, and you can buy these online. My favorite place to find patterns is on Etsy because they have a pretty good search function and a lot of designers are on there. I know there are a few websites that have PDF patterns from lots of different designers. We Sew is one that I know, that one's European. Archive Patterns is another one, and I've stumbled across a few other ones, but I don't really use those normally. I discover a lot of patterns and pattern designers on social media actually. Sewing pattern designers make really good use of hashtags. So if you see a pattern that you like, it probably has a hashtag that you can search and you'll be able to find the designer that way. PDF patterns have some really cool features that you just don't get with paper patterns. They often have a layers function where you can toggle on or off different sizes. And they also come with an A0 or copy shop file, which means you can print it on a really big piece of paper, or you can print it at home on your home printer and you'll just have to tile the pieces together. So it's really convenient because you can just download the pattern and immediately print it at home to use it right away. Speaking of printing at home, that brings me to today's sponsor, which is Moonbin. I am trying out their portable thermal printer today, and it is super compact and lightweight. It only weighs about 658 grams, which is about the weight of a bottle of water. It also doesn't use any toner, which is super convenient, so you don't have to worry about having refills on hand or buying new toner when you run out. It is super easy to use right out of the box and has USB connectivity for Windows and Mac computers, and also supports Bluetooth connectivity for iOS and Android smartphones. There is an app that you can download that allows you to print directly from your phone, and it is also super user-friendly and easy to use. I am really not that tech savvy, but this was such a breeze to set up. The box includes QR codes that will take you right to videos to help you set it up and to download all the drivers that you'll need. And there are even videos on how to load the paper correctly. It can print on a variety of sizes of paper from A4 to US letter and legal. It can also print a wide range of file format from Word documents to Excel documents, PowerPoint, and even JPEGs. And it's compatible for both Mac and Windows. I tested it out by printing a few of my sewing patterns and it worked really great. It also is really easy to tear off the pages with the perforations, and there's a built-in blade right on the printer as well. I really love how clean and minimalistic the design is. It's super sleek and fits in really nicely in my sewing studio. It's also available in more colors. There's a really cute pale pink color and also black if that is more your vibe. If you're looking for a small and affordable printer, be sure to check out this one by Moonbin. Thank you so much to Moonbin for sponsoring this video again. They've provided a special discount code, so if you're interested in getting one, make sure to click the link in the description. And now let's get back to talking about sewing patterns. Okay, next we're going to talk about digital or PDF patterns and all of the file types that you're going to get in your download. So when you first get your PDF pattern, it might be a little overwhelming because you'll likely have a number of files and they all have different names and labels on them. But most indie pattern designers will have an A0 or copy shop file, which is the big file. And that one you would have to send to a copy shop like Staples or UPS to print it out. There'll be a print at home option, and that will be a file that you can print on A4 or US letter size paper. And sometimes they will divide the sizes. So there will be a smaller size range and a larger size range. So just make sure to check the name of the file. That will tell you which one you need to print. You'll also want to make sure that you always open sewing patterns in Adobe Reader. I find that if you try to open it from a browser or from another program, it won't print properly, and you want to make sure it prints at the correct scale. Otherwise, your pattern pieces aren't going to be the right size. Most indie sewing patterns that you buy are going to have pretty detailed printing instructions, but not all do. If there aren't instructions, you just want to make sure that your scale is set to custom scale 100%, and again, that you're using Adobe Reader to open your file. Most patterns will also include a print guide, which will show you all the pages and then tell you which pages you need to print for your size and the view that you choose. Most patterns also include a scale box measurement, which you can just print one page just to test before you print the entire document. And you can measure with a ruler and see if it's printing at the right size. And the last file type that you might see is a projector file. And I love these because I now cut with a projector. I love that I can download a pattern and immediately just upload it to my computer and send it to my projector and start cutting immediately. It cuts out all the tiling and the gluing and the cutting and has just been a complete game changer for my sewing. I'm planning on doing a video all about projectors, so if you have any specific questions about it, make sure to leave those in the comments. All right, so we printed our pages. Now, how do we put these things together? So there are a few ways to put together the print at home sewing pattern files. My favorite way is to trim off the left and bottom border of each page and then glue them together. All patterns are different, but most will have page numbers and symbols along the edges of the borders to help you match them up. Our Stay Stitch patterns have both. They have page numbers and then little hearts on the middle of each side of the border that are numbered and lettered, so they help you know which page goes next to which page. I used to tape them together, and it is faster than gluing, but I find that if I want to reuse the pattern later, it's really difficult to put away properly, and the patterns can get all messed up when you fold them and put them in envelopes. So I really like glue, and that also means that if you do fold them, when you take them back out again, you can use a dry iron on them just to flatten them all out again. Whereas if you use tape, there's plastic there, so it'll melt if you use an iron. So that is why I prefer glue over tape. A little time-saving hack when you're putting your patterns together is you can cut the corners off instead of cutting the borders off if you want. Then you'll just line up the borders on top of each other and check that they're lined up at the corners. This leaves a little bit more paper, so it's a bit stiffer in the end, but it is a lot faster. Another little tip when you're assembling PDF patterns is to use a big window or like a sliding glass door like this, and it essentially becomes a light box so that you can see the borders underneath each page, but this method really works best with tape, not glue. Now that we've printed and assembled our pattern, let's talk about choosing a view and a size. On the back of your pattern envelope, if you have a paper pattern, you're going to see these little illustrations that are lettered, and that's going to show you the different views of the pattern that are included. So this pattern has a shirt, pants, and 2 dress views. And on the other side, you're going to see a lot of charts. So here you can see there's a body measurements chart, so that's where you'll look to choose the size. Then there's a fabric requirements chart that shows you how much fabric you need. And there's a garment measurements chart, which is the finished measurements chart, which is how big your garment is going to measure when you finish sewing it. The first thing you're going to want to look at is the size chart. So this is going to show the sizes and the body measurements that go along with it. You're going to choose the one that you fall most closely into. I usually range between 2 to 3 sizes. My waist is a little bit smaller in comparison to my hips. So it really depends on the pattern. A lot of indie patterns will tell you how to choose a size. If you're making a pair of pants and your hips are quite a bit wider than your waist, you're gonna go with your hip measurement. But it really does depend on your body shape and how you fit into the sizes. And once you figure out what what size or sizes you fit in, you're gonna look at the finished garment measurements. This is a really helpful chart, and to be honest, I didn't really know what to do with it when I was a beginner, but this is gonna tell you how much ease is in a garment. So ease is how much room or extra space is built into the garment. A really easy way to kind of visualize this is by taking a measuring tape and holding it around your body at the measurement that it says. So if the waist says it's 40 inches, you can measure out 40 inches and then hold that around your waist to see what it would feel like to have that much room in your garment. So this top has 0 ease. So that means I can't pinch out any extra fabric. So knit fabrics usually have negative ease because they stretch. But if you have a woven fabric, say you're making a shift dress, those are usually quite baggy and oversized, and you'd be able to pinch quite a bit of fabric out. And that amount is the amount of ease. So if you have 4 inches of extra ease, you can probably pinch out that 4 inches when you are wearing the garment. Once you've taken a look at the finished measurements, you can kind of decide if you want to adjust the size that you're going to cut, or if you want to stay with the one that fits with your body measurements. It's kind of like a preference thing, and you'll learn this as you make more garments. The next thing you're going to want to look at is fabric requirements. So on this pattern, you can see that it'll tell you how much fabric you need for what size you're making. This is going to change depending on what size you're making and also the width of the fabric you're working with. So make sure you ask when you're at the fabric store what the width is, because that can significantly change how much you need. So make sure you reference the pattern for that. Narrow fabrics are usually around 43 inches wide, and wide fabrics are usually 60 inches wide. So obviously you'll need less of a wide fabric and more of a narrow fabric. I'd say in general you want to buy as much as the pattern tells you to, though I do find that if you're really good at Tetrising your pieces, you can usually squeeze by with a little bit less, but that again comes with experience and knowing how much fabric goes into a certain type of garment. So I always say buy what they say at the beginning, and later when you have a bit more experience, you can kind of play around with that a bit. Pretty much all sewing patterns that you buy are gonna have different sizes nested together, and this is what that means. So they're all stacked up on top of each other nicely like this, and normally seam allowance is already included, so you don't have to worry about that. With indie patterns, each size is gonna have its own unique dashed line, and that's how you're gonna be able to tell which size is yours when the lines kind of interconnect and cross over each other. But what I like to do is highlight my size, especially if I'm grading sizes. And this is another thing that I didn't know you could do when I started sewing, is that if you do fall between 2 sizes, you can grade out to the next size. So for example, my waist is usually a size 8 and my hip is usually a 10 or a 12. So in my case, what I do is I trace out the size 8 from the waist portion, and then when I get to the hip, I gradually draw a smooth line from the 8 to the 10, and then blend either back down or stay in the size 10 for the rest of the pant. That way when you're cutting, it makes it really easy to see which line to cut and you won't make a mistake. So the next thing you can do is you can trace patterns. So I used to trace patterns, but I found that since I used a lot of PDF patterns, I wasn't that worried about tracing because I knew I could always print it off again. But if you do have a paper pattern, once you cut into it, you will not have access to the other sizes anymore. So if you change sizes and fluctuate in weight, or if you decide to make this pattern for somebody else who's not the same size as you, you're not gonna be able to do that once you cut your pattern. So I would recommend for paper patterns to always trace it. I like to use medical exam paper for tracing. You can buy it for about $18 a roll on Amazon in Canada, and that lasts me quite a long time. You can also buy Swedish pattern paper, or I've heard some people use like parchment paper as well, or wax paper, but those are a bit pricier. And I like the weight of medical exam paper because you can see the lines really clearly through it, and you don't have to use a tracing wheel or anything like that. You can just directly draw on top with a marker or a pen, and it makes it super easy. If you are using a paper that you can't see through, you would place the pattern on top of your paper, and then you would use a tracing wheel like this. This has this like spiky wheel on the end, and you'll take this and you'll trace around the pattern lines. And as you do that, it's gonna punch little tiny holes in your paper so that once you remove your pattern from on top, you can just connect all those little dots with a pen or a marker. When you're tracing, you're gonna wanna trace all of the markings from the pattern. So you're gonna put the pattern piece name, mark any notches, any fold lines, any cut on fold markings, and also the name of the pattern piece so that you know what it is later on. Then all that's left is to cut out your pattern pieces from the paper, and then they'll be ready to use to cut out your fabric. All right, now we're gonna talk about pattern symbols. I'm gonna go over all the symbols that you'll typically see on a pattern. The first one you might see is a notch. And sometimes they're marked with a mark that looks like this, like a little T, or it might be marked with a little triangle. These are normally there to help you match up your pattern pieces. It's kind of like a puzzle so that you know that they're fitting together properly. To mark your notches on your fabric, you can just snip into the fabric a little bit at each notch, or you can also do this with a fabric marker and just make a little mark where the notches are. On back pattern pieces, like the back of a sleeve or the back pant, you're normally gonna see 2 notches together. So you might see that at a crotch seam or at the back of a sleeve. And the 2 just denotes it's a back pattern piece. Another really common symbol you're gonna see is a dart. And these will look like big triangles on your pattern pieces. Darts are used in patterns to provide shaping, so you'll usually see them at the bust or the waist, and they help create volume in certain areas so that pattern can fit over the curves of your body. My favorite way to mark darts is to cut one leg of the dart open and then fold the other leg so that you can kind of create a little window and just trace the shape with your fabric marker underneath. And that way it's really easy to see where the lines are and you don't have to cut the triangle out and lose the point of it. So that's my tip for darts. I also use a really similar tip for pleats or pocket placements. I will just cut one leg of a pleat in the bottom part and fold it over to mark it. Or for pocket placement, if it's like a square patch pocket, I will cut out 3 sides and fold the other side so that I can mark in the square right on my pattern piece. The next symbol is the cut on fold symbol, and this means that you're gonna fold your fabric in half before placing the pattern piece on top and cutting it. This ensures that your pattern piece is perfectly mirrored when you open up your pattern piece, and it also usually falls along the grain line depending on the pattern you're making. The next symbol you'll see is grain line. And the grain line is very important because it will dictate how your garment sits on your body and how the fabric drapes. The grain line usually goes up and down the body because the grain line has the least amount of stretch and your pattern pieces will stay in shape if you cut along the grain line. Well, most woven pattern pieces are cut with the grain line vertically, but garments such as bias cut garments are cut with the grain line diagonally or on the bias. Knit patterns also usually have the grain line going vertically because the amount of greatest stretch is usually across the cross grain. If you take a look at the edge of your fabric, the one that doesn't fray and it often has pinholes in it, that is the selvage edge, and that's the edge that the grain line is going to be parallel to. So once you have all your paper pattern pieces cut out, you can lay them on your fabric according to the cut layout plan in your pattern, and it should look a little bit like this. Laying out your pattern pieces like this is going to help you maximize the fabric. If you're more experienced, you might not even reference this, but it's helpful because it will show you which way the pattern pieces should be facing, and it's like a little guide for you to make sure you cut all your pieces out correctly. Now that we know what all those symbols mean, we're ready to cut into our fabric. There are a few ways that you can secure your pattern down before you start cutting. I like to use pattern weights, so I have some pretty heavy metal ones. You could use basically anything around your house that's heavy. Sometimes I use cans or liquor bottles or kids' toys, whatever's around me. I also really like washers, which you can buy at Home Depot or a hardware store. They're nice and flat and also heavy, so they won't get in your way when you're cutting around them. The other option is to pin your pattern pieces down to your fabric so that they don't shift around. And you can either cut directly or you can trace the pattern pieces if you like. There are also options on the tools that you can use. When cutting with fabric shears, I like to pin my pattern pieces, and when I'm using a rotary cutter, I like to use pattern weights. My favorite cutting tools are from LDH Scissors, and I have an affiliate link in the description box if you're interested. And if you're using a rotary cutter, make sure to get a good self-healing cutting mat for underneath. Okay, that is it for today's video. I hope it helped you understand how to use and read sewing patterns. If you're looking for beginner-friendly and also cute sewing patterns, you can check out my pattern shops. I run Stay Stitch Pattern Co. with my friend Lindsay, and we have, I think, 8 patterns in our collection. And there's lots to choose from, and they're mostly very beginner friendly. And I also have my own shop, which only has 2 patterns at the moment, but there's one for a V-neck tank top that has 4 different views, and also a little bag pattern called the Nicola pouch, and it's a really cute like half moon fanny pack type of bag. And I also have a free bow tote pattern, which you can get by subscribing to my newsletter. I have a full sew along posted already on my channel, and you can find it here. I've linked everything down below if you want to check them out. If you found this video helpful, I would love it if you gave it a like and subscribed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!